Good morning and happy Sabbath. I was wondering how many people will be in church today, giving the 4th of July as people go visit family and friends. And again, thank you for coming today. Also, I was wondering what kind of sermon shall be today. I have the cycle on the series on practical Christianity, but I said, well, it's 4th of July, we need to speak about something related to that. And I wondered, what kind of topic should I choose? Maybe I shall speak on religious freedom, or maybe on other topics. And I said, well, let me look into the Bible in a situation where actually Jesus speaks about freedom. So I chose the passage from John chapter 8. The title is Free Indeed. We looked into the passage, and the passage has three main ideas, or at least three main ideas I'll be looking in today. I'll invite you to look with me into the passage of today, and the sermon has three sections. The first section is in pursuit of freedom. Verses 32 and 33, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. They answered him, we are Abraham's descendants and have never been in bondage to anyone. How can you say you will be made free? So the context is this. At the beginning of chapter 8, if you remember, the political religious leaders, things were mixed up in that time. And it's never good to mix up the politics and religion. Am I right? At least that is my understanding. And I know someone whom I'm not going to say his name, which I respect him very much, but I would say he has, if in private I can tell you who the person is, because he spoke on social media and in his podcast. And he actually is leaning into believing that the state and religion should have things in common. Anyway, it's an interesting viewpoint, I believe. But anyway, in Jesus' time, at the beginning of chapter 8, Jesus, if you remember, they bring a woman that was caught in adultery, and they go with the woman to Jesus, and they said, we caught this woman, and she was caught in adultery. What do you say we shall do to her? And they try to catch Jesus again, like in a chess movement, where you're caught in a place where it doesn't matter what you do, you'll be wrong. But Jesus avoids that, as you remember, starts writing on the ground. And what he writes on the ground is the sins of those accusers of the woman. And then he says to the woman, where are your accusers? And everybody was gone. And she says, there is nobody here to accuse me. And Jesus says, I don't accuse you either. Go and sin no more. That's the beginning of chapter 8. Obviously, that public defeat of these religious leaders made them upset with Jesus, and they come back again to him. And they always get into an argument with Jesus on spiritual things and on a number of issues. And now Jesus makes again a statement that offends them, because Jesus tells them, and you will know the truth. The truth about yourself, the truth about God. You'll know the truth, and the truth will make you free. And they're offended, and they said, well, we've never been in bondage to anybody. And Jesus doesn't get into, again, it's interesting because Jesus doesn't get into an argument with them about, all right, but you are under the dominion of the Roman government right now. How can you say that you are not in bondage of anybody? And Jesus, takes them to an interesting conversation, because Jesus knew that they were in a bondage much heavier than the Roman bondage, even though they were claiming that they were free and living on freedom and liberty. So for the first part of this study together, I'll like to invite you to a short historical journey in these pursuits for freedom. So first of all, let me begin with 4th of July, 1776, and Declaration of Independence. I was reading it yesterday. I was reading it through it. It's an interesting document. Actually, it's a wonderful document. And I'm going to read two of the passages, one in the beginning and the other one at the end. You know them much better than me. You've studied them for a long time, but for me, it's still new, so I enjoy it, reading it. So we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It ends, or one of the passages at the end, we, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress, assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world. So, you know, in this statement, the founding father of the United States, they very clearly affirm, in the beginning the Creator and in the end the Judge. Isn't that interesting? Because the human history begins with the Creator and ends up with the Judge. And I think if United States has been a great country, it has been because people recognized that God is in the beginning the Creator and God is in the end the Judge. And the values of the Protestant Reformation, affirmed by the founding fathers, became for a long time fundamental values that made this country a wonderful country and guaranteed the freedom and liberty to the people. But once these values begin to change, what do you think that happens with the rest of the values? The rest of, you see, when you start having cracks in the foundation, the whole building begins to have cracks and it's going to fall in the end. So that is the beginning. And you know what was the Declaration of Independence? A wonderful document affirming, I believe, so in my understanding, affirming clear biblical values, made this country a wonderful place to be in. But once these values begin to degrade and they're replaced by another thinking system which is not based on the Bible, the whole system begins to collapse. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Again, I'll take you through a very brief historical journey in pursuit of freedom. So the French Revolution was a significant historical event in Europe. It was, you see, in United States, 1776, French, 1798, and without getting into all the details of the French Revolution, what happened in France, people got so tired of the oppression of the religious system of the day, because France at that time was highly Catholic, and the leadership was Catholic. The Protestant movement began in the 1500s, but in France was still dominated. France was still dominated at that time by the Catholic Church, and people got so tired of it, and so they, not only of that, but the whole system was so corrupt, they rebel, and they start what was called the French Revolution. The symbol of the French Revolution, you see, out of respect for you and decency, I covered the woman. But the superior part, the half part of the woman was uncovered. And that is the symbol of the French Revolution. And that was not, the painting and the symbol of the French Revolution was not something that happened just randomly. That was designed with a purpose. Because what France did at that time, they completely threw the Bible out. And they completely replaced the biblical values in general, Christianity in general. Unfortunately, Christianity was wrongly represented. And because of that, they said, we don't want to have anything with Christianity, anything with God, anything with the Bible, anything with religion. They killed a lot of priests, destroyed churches, burned the Bible, and also they killed the king, the queen, and they beheaded thousands and thousands of people. The guillotine is an instrument of death, was invented during the French Revolution simply because they got tired of using the axe. So they said, we need to invent a machine that makes it easier. Can you imagine? So the result, the French Revolution, the motto of the French Revolution was liberté, égalité, fraternité. Wonderful ideas, right? Freedom, equality, and fraternity. They promoted that, but they took God out of it. So think of United States and French Revolution, which were very different. So during the French Revolution, they took God away completely. And they built a society, they built a nation on completely secular values. They said, we don't want to have anything to do with God. What followed after that was terrible. One of the historical great events that has remained in human history is the Night of Terror, which lasted for about a year, where they killed indiscriminately. It was enough to accuse someone that you were against the revolution. You arrested with no judgment, just killed, executed. If you had a problem with someone, it was enough just to blame them for something, killed with no judgment. Another event that happened soon after that, it was the Russian Revolution. This is another revolution, another pursuit of freedom. And you would have in this painting called Long Live the October Revolution. It happened in October. All these events, they are not just something that happened in one day. All these events happen on a number of years. They are fluent, actually. But certain days, certain years become more significant. The Russian Revolution. In this revolution, you see, in this picture, painting actually, you see, this is Lenin, Vladimir Ilyich Lenin was his full name. And next to him is the person who will establish the communism, which was Stalin. So these people, they promised to the multitudes of people, freedom. What turned out to be, it was actually a very oppressive system. Stalin himself killed thousands and thousands of his own people. They marched them in Siberia and in other places. Simple people, women, children, peasants, well-educated people. They destroyed their own people in the name of freedom, in the name of liberty. And I remember being a young boy in communist Romania when this painting was hanging on the walls in the schools. I remember that, along with other communist leaders and ideologists, and obviously the Romanian dictator Ceausescu. He has his painting in front of the church, in front of the classroom. I'm sorry, not church. Yeah, not in the church, fortunately. As we move on through the history of these movements for freedom, because all these revolutions, they promised the people freedom and liberty. It was in 1945, immediately after the World War II. Immediately after the World War II, Europe was divided to the degree that Germany, which was a united country, at one point was divided in two, the West and the Eastern Germany. And it was so, they built a wall, which was now the Berlin Wall, in order to divide the country. But the communism, soon enough after the World War II, got into Romania, and Romania became a communist country. And I remember after the revolution, we had a series of evangelistic meetings using archaeology. And I remember every evening a gentleman came. He was a man at that time in his late 60s. And he would come every evening. And I remember with these meetings, when you present biblical archaeology, you speak about God, the Bible, and this and all kinds of topics. And I remember sitting at the door and greeting people. And he came one evening, shook my hand, and he said, "I wish I could believe." He was young when the revolution happened in Romania. He was very young, and he embraced fully the communist ideology. He had the responsibility in one of the communist business. He was responsible for forestry and managing forests and this and that. That could have been a great business because you could do a lot of under-the-table business with people selling wood and stuff like that. But he was a very honest man. I visited him and we talked, and he said, "I believed in the communist ideals." Why? Because the communists promoted, again, freedom and equality for everybody. Everything that belonged to the private property of the people, they confiscated everything. And they confiscated the properties of the church. We had a large seminary with a farm, students, building. They took it all. The teachers and the leaders of the school, they had someone came to one of our teachers. I was reading a biography, and they told him, "You go and run somewhere where nobody can find you and wait there to see what actually happens." Because they arrested leaders, they arrested people, wealthier people, they arrested them, they confiscated everything they had, and they said, "You have become wealthy because you took from the poor, so we take everything you have and we send you to jail." So that's what they did, and they promised people equality and freedom and happiness. And I grew up in that regime. And I know it was a dream that never happened. I know that. So this is one of the, what 4th of July is in the United States, 23rd of August was in Romania. What more? I mean, they would have parades and marches and people, and they'll get the students from the schools, and we are there with flags and pretending that we are happy and praising the communist regime and all the achievements and saying, "Hoorah, hoorah, la, 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 long live the party," and so on and so forth. And you see here in this picture, Lenin, Engels, and Marx, the great ideologists of the communist philosophy. One of their greatest achievements was that they took the Bible and God out from the people. And being a believer or being a practicing Christian was a problem in those days. I remember many, many times they told me, "Are you a believer? Keep your faith in your heart and don't talk to anybody. Don't talk about this." And so on and so forth. Maybe one of these days I'm going to have a presentation on communism, both the secular and political aspects, and how was the faith in the church. If you would be interested, because there are interesting lessons, I believe. So if you would be interested, all you have to do, you have to ask me, and I'll be happy to do it. Actually, I lectured on political science at one of the colleges, because we had a church member, he was a professor, and he would ask me to come and speak on communism at a college. So that was the life again it was all, I know that it was all a farce. We were pretending. And obviously they did some persecutions. In the 50s, the persecutions were very hard on the Seventh-day Adventists. In my days, we had troubles with them. I had 2 friends of mine. They were sent to prison because they did not took the orders on Sabbath in the service, in the army. Many people lost schools because exams are on Sabbath. I lost a very good school. I couldn't go to the exam because I was on Sabbath. Alina, my wife, left the day school, she did evening school because of the same reason, and so on and so forth. Finding a job with the Sabbath off was very difficult because the week was Monday to Saturday. So that was life. But finally, in 1988 was the fall of the communist bloc and another series of revolutions. And in the end, we ended up with the revolution in Romania in 1998 in December. Again, I lived through that, I know that. And I chose this picture because, you see, in the end, they came up with the dictatorship is over. Ceausescu, the leader, is gone, and we are free. So again, the same slogan of finding freedom and liberty came, and it was, it was believed by people that finally, after the communism will be falling in Romania, we will enjoy the freedom. Well, sure, there is the social freedom, there is somewhat the political freedom, but I believe that it seems to me that the dream of liberty and freedom has never been truly found, or apparently has never been truly found by these many revolutions. And the reason is in what Jesus actually would say. As I was thinking of these aspects, the Bible passage from Job 35, because of the multitude of oppressions, they cry out. They cry out for help because of the arm of the mighty. But no one says, where is God, my maker? So people live for centuries, and in many, many places, they cry out for freedom and cry out against injustice. And the Bible says humans are looking for an ideal outside of God. And as long as they do that, they'll never find it. Because Jesus said, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. It is not a political revolution, and it is not a social movement that brings real and genuine and true freedom to people. The history of humanity has been a continual pursuit for freedom and liberty, but in spite of ideologies, social and political changes, it seems that the real and true freedom has never been achieved. The reason? True change is much more than a political revolution. It is a spiritual one. And we move to the second concept of this morning. In John, Jesus continues in the same passage, and Jesus says, and answer them, most assuredly, I say to you, whoever commits sin is the slave of sin. So, the Apostle Peter reinforces the same concept. While they promise them liberty, so in the first century, there are people again coming through the Christian churches and promising them liberty and freedom. But they themselves are slaves of corruption, for by whom a person is overcome, by him also he is brought into bondage. A few translations put it differently and it says, for you are a slave to whatever controls you. For people are slaves to whatever masters them. So the question is, as we celebrate, 4th of July, is there a possibility that still people are in bondage? And I was looking on an interesting graph. I was looking for some statistics. And what I found one which looked into the last 30 years in the United States on the death rate because of the opioids, death rate from opioids doses. So look at these 10 countries. The top is United States. But look at the graph. In the last 30 years, there is a terrible graph. There is a terrible rise in the death because of opioids. I was looking actually for a statistic that will show that the usage of narcotics and drugs in the last 30 years. I couldn't find one that will satisfy me. Yes? Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I know that the tobacco went down. I know that. But anyway, the Norway, it's an interesting, the green one, it went down. I don't know, more studies to be done to understand these social phenomena and related to public health. But I was surprised to find that the rate of death, actually, it's scary. And the United States is at the top. And I was wondering, we are living in a free country, which definitely it's a promoter of freedom and liberty. And still, there is another liberty that people don't have, which is freedom from sin and self. And that's where the problem is. And that's where Jesus comes and says, whoever is the slave of sin, it's still in bondage. It doesn't matter where you live. And it doesn't matter how long. And it doesn't matter under what regime you live. Because the greatest bondage is the slavery of sin. The end of this section is from Desire of Ages, a passage. Every soul who refuses to give himself to God is under the control of another power. He's not his own. He may talk of freedom, but he's in the most object slavery. The only escape is in the accepting the freedom of Christ. So I was wondering, again, today I live in this wonderful country. We enjoy the privileges of living in the United States. I'm very happy that we can, give books away and do evangelistic meetings and could do whatever we want and have social media for the same purpose of evangelism. The problem remains the same, and the question remains the same. How many people actually have experienced the true freedom, the freedom that comes from Christ alone, and the true freedom that comes from sin? Now, sin is not only drugs, tobacco, and whatever. Sometimes you think of the most extreme. It's actually the freedom that God gives us from our own self, and natural human selfishness. The third section, free indeed. Jesus says, therefore, if the Son makes you free, you shall be free indeed. So the real freedom comes only through Jesus Christ. And it's the only way to experience freedom, is the freedom from sin, which God alone can do that. In Isaiah, it was this wonderful prediction about Christ. The Spirit of the Lord God is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me to preach good tidings to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and the opening of the prison to those who are bound. It's interesting because, even though some societies are better than others, no question, right? Living under the Roman slaving system would have been very difficult. Living in communism has been difficult. But the major problem and the major question is not so much where you live, because there are plenty of people that cannot move to the United States or in any of the European free countries. We have people that live in China, people that live in North Korea, people that live in Cuba, which is still communist, people that live in Russia or in other places. And they'll never be able to move in a free country. Can they be free? Indeed. And the answer is yes, because the only true freedom is not given by a government or a social system, is given by Christ alone. When he says, our passage, when Christ says, let me see. If the Son makes you free, you will be free indeed. I would like to end this morning with one book that I've read a number of years ago. Has anybody read this book? A few of you have read the book. It's an amazing book. It's the story of a pastor in Cuba a number of years ago. Again, hard communist Cuba. And he was arrested one day with no explanations to be gone for 20 years. And to spend his life in prison for 20 long years. And he tells the story. I mean, it's amazing and incredible. His life in the communist prison. At one point, maybe you remember that he was punished for not working on Sabbath. I don't know if you remember what the punishment was. Does anybody, of those of you who read the book, do you remember what the punishment was for not working on Sabbath? They threw him in a latrine. So all the cells will have a pond, a latrine, with all the garbage, all the miseries. The punishment for not working on Sabbath, for the punishment for being faithful on Sabbath, was to be thrown in that latrine. As he was wounded, and because they beat him badly and tortured, he survived. Not only that he survived, in prison were other intellectual people and well-educated people, and he got the idea of opening up a university in prison. And he began to organize people. Somehow he was allowed to connect with other prisoners, some of them professors of language or arts or science, and they organized the university in prison. Do you remember that in the book? And he, amazingly, even though he was imprisoned in one of the hardest prisons that you can get in the world, he was acting actually like a free man. And he shared and that was because if the Son makes you free, you will be free indeed. And it doesn't matter where you are. Oli and I will end today with this wonderful Bible passage. If the Son makes you free, you shall be free indeed. The question is, are we free indeed today? Besides the national celebration of the 4th of July and 250 years of independence, the question is, am I free today? Am I free indeed? Because the true freedom is only given by Jesus Christ. And it doesn't matter where you are, it doesn't matter where we live. That's the only way to experience freedom. And my prayer for you and for myself is that we'll think about and ponder on these things today. Is there anything in my life that holds me in slavery today? Is there anything that hinders me from enjoying the freedom that Jesus Christ wants to give us? And I pray that the Lord's blessing and the freedom that comes from Him, we enjoy it and take advantage of it today. Amen. We'll end up with the same song that we sang in the beginning, the last verse of the song. Come join me. I will.